Hi Kenya, good evening. I am making this video to give you feedback on your lesson delivery and final lesson plan. And I'm going to start out by telling you what you were really great in, what you were proficient in, and what you could use some work on, or kind of like glow and grows. So, you did your lesson on first grade over length. And I would first like to start out by saying that your goals were aligned to the state content and standards according to your lesson presentation. And your activities, materials, and assessments are aligned to the state standards. The students were focusing on measuring length, how long it is, using manipulatives. Most learning objectives and state content standards were communicated during your lesson. You had those learning objectives, the success criteria, and learning intentions read aloud and had the students repeat after you, as well as having them posted on the board for the students to see. Your learning objectives connected to what the students had previously learned, and you made that clear when you asked the students what they had been talking about in math recently. Your expectations for student performance were clear. You had materials and directions posted on the Elmo, as well as repeating what they were expected to do. And your state standards were displayed on the board, as I mentioned before. During the presenting instructional content, you did a great job at making sure all the information was essential. Nothing was irrelevant or confusing or non-essential. Then your activities and materials supported the lesson objective, which was to measure the length. And you provided opportunities for students to have interaction with other students. You had students turn and talked when you asked about what is length and why is it important, as well as having students turn and talk about what they observe while measuring unsharpened pencils with paper clips, large and small. These are the areas that I felt that you did very well in. Mostly staying connected to that objective was the key point. Now I'm going to be talking about the areas that you were proficient in and what you could do to make yourself exceed that proficiency level. You built on the students' prior knowledge. You did this when you asked the students about what they had been talking about in math recently. I would have liked to see it connected to other things that they've learned throughout the year. You provided appropriate time for student work and lesson and unit closure. I felt that you were proficient in this area and didn't exceed is because I felt that the students could have had a little more thinking time. It was more of a mini lesson. It only took 15 minutes to get through, well, about 20 minutes to get through the engage, and I'm pretty sure you did a 5E lesson, so I might be doing this out of order. Explore and all that. I just felt that there could have been more time to also close the lesson. Evidence that plan is appropriate for the age, knowledge, and interest of most learners. I think that regarding their age, you did a great job with just, using the paper clips to measure, because that's how they're supposed to be doing in regards to the state standards. I feel like they could have used more challenging material, and we'll get into that when I get to the activities and materials. Standards and objectives, you were mostly, above proficiency, except for a few key areas that I will discuss in a little bit. Visuals, presenting instructional content. The visuals that establish the purpose of the lesson preview the organization of the lesson and include internal summaries of the lesson. I know you talked to the students about what they were going to do today. You said today you're going to measure an unsharpened pencil with a paper clip, and you posted what materials they were going to need and how they were going to use them for their activity. But I think having on the board a preview of what they were going to be doing during the day as a visual would have been really beneficial, especially since they're so young, they can't remember everything that they're going to be doing. And it's a great way for the teacher, to stay on topic and in order of things. You provided examples, illustrations, analogies, and labels. Specifically, you told them what materials they were going to use. You showed them an anchor chart with what the sticky note should look like when they were writing their name in the 1 and 2. You wrote down the definition of links, and you wrote down the rules of measuring, the no overlapping, no gaps, based on the students' thinking. And you also used Unifix cubes and showed them how to do that. You had concise communication and logical sequencing and segmenting based on your lesson as well. For your activities and materials, I gave you proficient in sustaining the students' attention, because I feel like there could have been something a little more engaging for them. I think having them, talk with their neighbors was sustaining the students' attention. Asking them questions was great. I just felt like you could have had something that was better on the engaged portion of things. You elicited a variety of thinking by asking the students why they think length is important, as well as having the students have their opinion on what the rules of measuring were. You provided time for reflection, and you were relevant to the students' lives using an unsharpened pencil, although I think it would have been really great if you could have really brought into real life things, because who really measures a pencil? You incorporated multimedia and technology using the Elmo. Your oral and written feedback was mostly academically focused and frequent. You said things like, how did you measure? No overlapping, what does that mean? What does measurement mean? The only thing that I could have suggested is that when the students kept giving you so much more and you just wanted the definition, you should have used what they were saying to kind of redirect what they were saying to really get to what you were wanting. Circulating, I did notice that you circulated towards the end of when they were writing on the sticky notes, but I also realized that you were gathering materials during that time. These materials should have already been grabbed and put together. So you could have been able to monitor and support them while they were writing on their sticky notes and measuring. And then that goes into the feedback from students is sometimes used to monitor and adjust instruction. Finally, I'm going to talk about your gross, areas that you were not proficient in. I felt that your lesson was very basic and it never reached to getting complex. Even though they're in first grade, they're completely capable of having that more complex thinking. Evidence that the plan provides some opportunities to accommodate individual student needs. I didn't witness that in your lesson delivery. Everything was kind of the same for everybody. Didn't see any accommodations being implemented. Goals, materials, instruction, and assessment take into consideration learners' proficiency level and cultural knowledge. I noticed on your lesson plan that you didn't state who your ELLs were, where they were from, like what their proficiency levels were. So it's really hard to give you a proficient in this area because I don't know who the ELLs are, as well as I didn't see anything in your lesson delivery that connected to their cultural knowledge. Also, their evidence that most students demonstrate mastery of the objective. I know you talked about it during your whole group instruction when y'all were on the ground, but I didn't see any evidence that they had mastered the objective besides them putting in their opinion about what rules there are to measuring. There are linguistic objectives according to learners' language proficiency level. I did not see this being present during the lesson delivery, so I was unsure. And like I said before, you didn't mention who your ELLs were, so it's kind of hard to gauge what linguistic objectives you had for them. Modeling by the teacher to demonstrate his or her performance expectations. You did model the sticky note, but you didn't model how you wanted them to measure the pencil. And I don't know if that's because you were trying to have them explore before you explained. So I gave you below proficient on that. Instruction takes into account learners' linguistic and cultural knowledge. Again, you didn't mention who your ELLs were, and I didn't see any evidence of incorporating their cultural knowledge into the lesson. I know it can sometimes be difficult to do that, but easy ways to do that are, for example, in your lesson, you were talking about measurement. Well, there's two types of measurement. There's U.S. customary, and then there's the metric system. So even if that's above what they're supposed to be learning, it's a good thing to mention it for those ELs. Again, I talked about how I think that your lesson could have gone from basic to complex instead of being so basic. Inducing student curiosity, finding a really, really engaging way instead of just asking what is length and why is it important would be finding another way to really engage your kids, even your ELLs, by making it a cultural question. Materials have been adapted to fit the learner's linguistic and cultural knowledge. Again, I don't know who your ELLs were, and I didn't see any evidence of you incorporating that cultural knowledge or their linguistic levels, besides having pictures next to the definitions and writing the definitions. And then feedback is sometimes given during guided practice. Again, you were gathering your materials during the guided practice, so I didn't see much feedback being given, as well as I know it's really hard on those cameras, the rotating cameras, to really understand what the kids are saying, especially since the microphone was broken. Overall, my feedback to you is that you stayed aligned to the standards and objectives, but there was no mention of the linguistic objectives. It didn't get very complex, and it stayed very basic, so I would have liked to see some more challenging aspects to the lesson. But you did, however, provide materials to fit most EL linguistic knowledge. You provided them written directions, provided pictures to represent objects or definitions on the Elmo, as well as the anchor chart. And the students were able to show using their manipulatives instead of having to speak it out loud, which can be a very great opportunity for them to do so, our ELLs. I, however, did not see any connection to the ELL's cultural background, and it's important to make connections to cultural backgrounds to better engage our ELLs and our other students, and we need to make the content relatable to that student. Overall, I think that you could have been more proficient in accommodating your lesson to your ELLs. However, you did a great job at staying aligned to your objectives and standards, as well as using engaging manipulatives. Anyways, that is my feedback for you, and it's been a great semester working with you. Have a wonderful night.